left off in section 51. We had done the previous verses here, 1a through 1c, if I remember correctly. And I think we were ready for 1d, if that's where everyone else seems to. Okay. All right. Would someone like to read 1d to 1e? Yeah. Brother Rick.
And if he shall transgress and is not accounted worthy to belong to the church, he shall not have power to claim that portion which he has consecrated unto the bishop for the poor and needy of the church. Therefore he shall not retain the gift, but shall only have claim on that portion that is deeded unto him, and thus all things shall be made sure according to the laws of the land.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on what's going on here? What's that?
It's pretty straightforward.
Okay. Yeah, Brother Rick, yeah.
I'll just take a wild stab. If he was deeded a plot of land, that would remain his, but if he had access to the other resources of the church, that was not his, available to him anymore.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is that if I join the church and I consecrate my properties and everything to the church, and now they're a part of the church, and I decide to leave the church, then that doesn't mean that I can walk in and say, okay, I want everything that I've given, in tithing and consecration to the church, I want that back. That's not going to happen. And I know that's not quite exactly what's going on here, but yes, Alex.
Well, I was going to make the distinction that consecration does not automatically imply that you've deeded the property to the church.
Right.
And that's kind of what he's establishing here is like, well, there's the parts that you have spiritually given to the hands of the bishop for the use of the church, the saints, the poor, the needy, and then there's what you still, actually retain ownership of.
Right, because we're our own stewards at this point. Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, and Joseph's careful to make sure that they're following the laws of the land, because if that was worded otherwise, then they would be in conflict with, the law of the land.
Yeah. I think also this kind of came about as well. You had that 459 acres that was made available to the saints so that they could settle on there in the Kirtland area. And basically, it wasn't very long after that was pulled away. And so I think that's probably trying to address some of that as well, the Lord helping understand that. It was interesting that when you get to 1835, and I may read from this right here. This is out of Joseph's journal. And he says, October 30th, 1835, Friday, at the home of Mr. Francis Porter, called from Jefferson County, New York, a member of the Methodist Church, called to make some inquiries about land in this place, whether there were any farms for sale and that are valuable, and whether or not a member of the church could move into the vicinity and purchase lands and enjoy his own possessions and properties without making it common stock. He had been requested to do so by some brethren who lived in the town of Leroy, Jefferson County, New York. I replied that I had a valuable farm joining the temple lot that I would sell, and that there is other lands for sale in the place, and that we have no common stock business among us, that every man enjoys his own property, or can, if he is disposed, consecrate liberally or illiberally to support the poor and needy or the building up of Zion. So you can kind of see what the prophet's saying there in that whole process. So even though what's said here, there's no such thing as, and I'll put it in the modern day terms, I remember when I was a kid, this all things common. It's a myth and everything else. And what's interesting about that, by the way, is also F. Henry Edwards puts it in his book as well, that there really isn't any such thing as all things common. So I don't know where the church started off on that, or where they started getting the genesis of that idea, except for, obviously the term in the New Testament, but we never really believed that as a church. So it's kind of odd how that came about. Now, the only thing I can possibly think of is that by the time you get to beyond a little bit of the 1950s, I really feel like 1925 was probably when everything really started falling apart. But you get into the 50s and forward, I don't know that the law was really being taught. I don't know that there was much going on that was really productive at that point. So that's probably where that came about. Any other thoughts on these two verses here? Okay. 2a to 2b. Anyone want to read those two? Okay, I'll read them for you. Oh, you okay? Sure.
And let that which belongs to this people be appointed unto this people. And the money which is left unto his people, let there be an agent appointed unto this people to take the money, to provide food and raiment according to the wants of this people. And let every man deal honestly, and be alike among this people, and receive alike, that ye may be one, even as I have commanded you.
Some interesting things there. Arguably some prototypes for some things too that we see. So what are your thoughts before I tell you what I think? Go ahead. Go ahead, Don.
It's interesting that he says that which belongs to this people is appointed unto this people. But then he says, and the money which is left unto his people. So he's declaring here that this people, the church, is his people. Mm-hmm. And there's an agent that's appointed unto it to take care of the money, but it belongs to those that are his people. And they are to deal honestly and fairly with each other, that they receive alike, that they may be one. Receive alike in that they receive what they need. Mm-hmm. A family of two is not going to receive the same thing as a family of 10. They're dealing honestly with each other, that they may be one in that they receive what they do need.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I see that it says up there, which is left unto his people, but that's not what the book says. The book says this people all the way through.
Which book?
The Doctrine and Covenants, what we're studying.
Oh, okay. Okay. When you referred to that, I didn't know what you... yeah. I would have referred... I thought you would have said text or this, whatever. Okay. Any other thoughts? So one of the things that I find interesting about this is when it talks about this, and it talks about, and let there be an agent appointed unto this people. That you find this language kind of in a number of places, and this warning that's here is because in times past, when money was, for instance, given to the apostles or any of the missionaries, what happened with that money? Right. They were to report it. They had to give an accounting for it of some sort. But sometimes that didn't happen. Sometimes it just got used for whatever it got used for, right? I don't know that anybody was necessarily trying to do wrong in that, but there were issues that were there. The idea of appointing an agent I find very interesting, because that language was what they ascribed to a branch, right? There would be a bishop's agent, someone to collect the monies. And so that was kind of, I believe, a prototype to that idea of the bishop's agent. So someone who can account for the monies and make sure that, they went to where they needed to go. Because before that time, you just simply had priesthood really just kind of collecting funds, and it would just kind of go where it went. And here again, not that anybody did anything wrong with it, not that I'm saying that there were some people that did do wrong with it. I should back up. There were those that did misuse it, but they were dealt with. But the idea is to make it clear. Yes, Brother Rick.
We're talking about this people and his people. What's the difference between the two words, the letter T? Maybe somebody made a typo somewhere.
Yeah, and it's very possible that's the case. That's very possible. It's one of the things I find that between the different versions and everything else like that, and it's kind of frustrating because as the church went on, they felt at liberty to correct grammar and do things when, in my mind, I guess I fall towards that purist thing, just leave it alone. Because if we have the original, we don't have to wonder what it is. We can extrapolate from that point. But if you change it, and then somebody 10 years from now changes it again because it doesn't quite fit the grammar of the day, because don't mean to offend any grammatarians or English teachers here, or professors of English, but our language does drift, and it is not precise. And so the rules in that change as well, which could also change the meaning. And so it creates a real problem, as you can see. Yes?
I just don't think anything's been changed. I think somebody just left a T off of that word, because I will go with the book. When you copy something, it's easy to make a mistake, but the book is what I would go by, and it says this.
Okay. And that's fine with what you're saying there, but I happen to know that you can compare different Doctrine and Covenants, and you will see different punctuation, you will see different lettering and different wording on things. So that's what happens. Yes, Galia?
That's what I was wanting to know, was your Doctrine and Covenants is different than mine.
Oh, no, I think this might be a typo. I would agree with that. But I'm going to say, though, I have run into where, in the Doctrine and Covenants, where there are minor changes that you will see that are there. And in fact, I'll give you a good case in point. In the Remnant Church, Stacy can attest to this, that we had an apostle that went in and decided to change the grammar and capitalization. And I don't know if he ever really changed any of the words, but he decided to go in and do that with the R revelations. And so the current ones they have right now are not the way that they were originally presented. Yes.
I think it's significant too that it does say, this people. It's talking about members of the church. So it's like if there's leftover money, we don't just give it to the world. We don't give it. I mean, there are poor and needy everywhere, but this is to be used for the people of the church.
Yeah. It's like I say, it's amazing. That's why it's so dangerous to change anything, because, like I say, one letter, a misspelling, a punctuation type situation could really create a problem. Okay. Good conversation on this. 3A to 3C. Someone like to read that? Yes, Brother Craig.
And let that which belongeth to this people not be taken and given unto that of another church. Wherefore, if another church would receive money of this church, let them pay unto this church again, according as they shall agree. And this shall be done through the bishop or the agent, which shall be appointed by the voice of the church.
Okay. So what's he saying here? Is he talking about the Catholic Church? And the Baptist Church? Okay, Brother Craig?
I don't remember where I got this information, but where it says another church, I have in parentheses branch. So we're talking about between the branches of the church. You know, one church can help another as needed or whatever, but they really should give it back. It should be more a loan than just a gift, unless that's the way it was given.
Right, yeah. But this is important, and this is a part of, really, if you want to argue some of the constitutional law of the church. It's, for instance, why some of the people did not want to form a district or have the bishop come in and do things. So this is a safeguard so that someone can't come into this particular branch of the church and say, "Oh, you got all this money, and we're going to take all of that from you, and we're going to use it for this other church over here, or we're going to do this over there." We don't believe in that type of thing. It's up to that church and those people to consecrate that surplus, or to help and provide for the church as a whole, as well as where they're at. And it may also be that they maybe have a larger portion because they have a larger number of people, and so their needs are greater. So, when we look at this historically, this was one of the problems that I remember why they did not want to form a district in the remnant church, because they thought that there was a tax, and they thought that there was, the bishop could just come in and take all that money, and so they didn't want to provide that opportunity for him to do so. And the bishop doesn't have that right to do that. He certainly has the right to counsel them. There's no question there. But you can't come in and just do that, because it runs into that whole thing of being an individual steward. So just like that, the branch is the primary congregational unit, which is what Joseph Smith III said that it was. It's an entity that has to be respected. It can't just walk in. It's just like the first presidency. The president of the church just can't walk in and say to some other branch and say, I'm preaching today. That they can extend that to him, but that's not expected. That's not, something to do. You just don't walk in and do something like that. You have to respect that. That'd be like the president of the church coming to your house and saying, "Well, hey, I'm showing up for dinner, and oh, by the way, you need to move the furniture in the house this way." It's like, no, the Lord didn't set that up that way. Yes, Brother Craig.
Just like to say, too, I don't know how they did offerings or whatever then. They must not have, really designated right up front. But that's one of the reasons we have envelopes or we have, choices. We say, if you're paying, if you're giving of your tithing, label it so I know it's tithing. If you're giving a operating type offering, then please designate that. And that's why I said, if you want to pay extra towards the mortgage, please somehow indicate that you want it to go to the mortgage. So, we as individuals and as a body are recognizing our own stewardships, and we can tell the bishop, we can tell the church how we want that money used, and that takes care of a lot of it. So we don't have to worry about some of what they're talking about here. You designate it how you want it used, and that's how it'll be used. We're not taking away agency there and just saying, give me the money and I'll use it any way I want to. It's like, give me the money and I'll use it the way you want to.
Yeah, it's, the idea of directed funds wasn't really Shell over here. They didn't really have a vehicle really to do that too easily, especially if they were passing a collection plate. They didn't have envelopes, and so you'd really had to go to the bishop and say, put money in his hand, say, I want this to go for this, or I wish to consecrate this, whether it be property or monies or whatever, for this, and so forth. Right. But I don't even think at that time there was anything in the law of the land as far as that was concerned. I think that once you gave it to your church, the church was free to do whatever it wanted to do with it. So, yeah.
Going over all these verses, everything, I'm thinking of how the church was set up in that time period. Is, they didn't choose to drive across, cities or whatever to go to church and everything. They went to church with the people they lived nearest and around. And they knew those people, they knew the needs, the wants, and everything was going on within their group. And also, they weren't sending all their money to foreign missions and the money that was used to, for missionary work. Their new members were gathering in, and they were growing. And so more branches and stuff were popping up, and they were able to sustain it all, where now we all live further away from each other. We're not interacting on a daily basis with each other, knowing what everybody's needs are and wants. And, and then they're taking money and, and not necessarily us in general, but are taking money and sending people to Africa to convert people. But those people aren't gathering in once they're converted. And then people are soliciting, well, they need a building in this place, and they need this and that and everything. And it's like, I'm not really sure that's how the church was supposed to have actually, I don't know when they made the switch to send money outward instead of pulling people in. And I sit there and I think also is, you're talking about with the poor and everything and other churches and everything, there's a million good causes out there and everything, but if all the, because I know you hear this a lot, if all the rich people would just give their money to the poor, there would still be poor people. That would never end.
Yeah, after 6 months and the money was spent, yeah.
Yeah, it would never end. So, as many good causes, and I'm not telling people not to give money to good causes if you feel led to, but this way, I feel like all the money was centralized and they knew what they were giving the money for. And it was growing the church and taking care of each other.
Yeah. The one thing that I feel was significant is the Lord did not say, go into all the world and be a bishop. He didn't say that. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand that that's the case. We have, in foreign missions, in my opinion, done a lot of damage by giving money. Not by bringing the gospel, that's what we were commanded to do. But by providing money, we have created challenges for those people. And I know when I came to the Remnant Church, one of the things that I was trying to get across, and I think I finally did, which was the value of money is different in every country. And so when you go to a country and you give $1,500, that might be a full wage, a good wage for 2 people for a year. And so now you gave this to one person, and now they've got to figure out what to do with this. And now you've created a big dilemma for them, because now they all of a sudden have to become a bishop. And, sometimes they think they need to quit their job and so forth. And so it just creates a big problem in that whole aspect of it. But when we look here to where we're at right at the moment, the church at this point in time didn't have foreign missions. And so you don't see that happening really till far west. Far west is when you see the apostles are sent out into all the world. And that's when that occurs. Okay, any other thoughts along that line? Okay. 4A to 4B. Someone like to read that? Okay, Brother Don, thank you.
And again, let the bishop appoint a storehouse unto this people, unto this church. And let all things, both in money and in meat, which is more than is needful for the want of this people, be kept in the hands of the bishop. And let him also reserve unto himself for his own wants and for the wants of his family, as he shall be employed in doing this business.
Okay. Any thoughts on this? Surely there's got to be some thoughts. It can't be just me. Sure.
Thought that's been going through my head on all of this is something Alex goes on and on about, is that right now, I mean, we don't give all of our excess to the church. We've got to put money away because they've tripled our taxes. I mean, and we've got to think about retirement when we get too old to work. And so none of this is even talking about inheritances. And so, but then I think about also what Alex was always going on about is we're not really meant to be living the way we are right now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We're meant to be living multi-generational so that as we retire, our children will start taking care of everything, the land, all of it keeps perpetuating forward. And we don't live that way anymore. And so the question is are we going to go back to that kind of way of living? And where, like I said, none of this is talking about inheritances either.
Okay. Yeah, you made me had a thought here, and I was trying to remember in my mind here. When the Nephites were in captivity, and they were paying a tax that was grievous to be borne. And I was trying to remember, was that 30%? You remember what that was, Brother Craig? I was trying to flip to that.
Well, they had various taxes over their period. When the Lamanites had them, like King Limhi and stuff, they were actually giving 50%
Okay.
of what they had. But when the evil King Noah, and that's the one they claimed was grievous to be born, it was
Yeah.
only 20%.
Yeah, that's.
I say only. And I don't know, have you heard the, who's the comedian that did The Streaker and all that stuff? Anyway, he's got...
Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens has a song, if 10% is good enough for Jesus, it ought to be good enough for Uncle Sam. It's a wonderful song, and I go, yeah, I think that's good. So anyway, yeah, the 20% was considered grievous to be born.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It was close to a third, something like that. That's what I was thinking. But yeah, we're pretty close to 50% right now, anyway. So that's it's yeah. When you add everything together at the end of the day, that's about where you are, And it's amazing that when it initially was instituted, it was about 2%, I believe. And people were upset about 2% because that was just, that was crazy how much. So, interesting. All right, let's move on to 4C to 4D. Would someone like to read those two? Sure.
And thus I grant unto this people a privilege of organizing themselves according to my laws. And I consecrate unto them this land for a little season, until I, the Lord, shall provide for them otherwise. and command them to go hence, and the hour and the day is not given unto them. Wherefore let them act upon this land as for years, and this shall turn unto them for their good.
Okay. So it's interesting what's going on here. What's he saying? Where are they going? Yeah, Brother Don.
Interesting wording. It's a privilege for you to organize yourselves, but you do so according to my laws. And if you do that, then I will consecrate it unto you for a little season. So many times the Lord has blessed the land because the people were righteous, cursed the land because they weren't. And so we need to remember that all that He has commanded us to do is not for His benefit, it's for our benefit. He will consecrate it unto us if we do so according to His law. And, it's going to be their land until I say otherwise. I find that interesting. When the Israelites were taken to Babylon, I had a little...
Carried off into Babylon.
yeah. Anyway, they were carried off to Babylon. Well, after a period of time, they were allowed to go back. Well, they had already become settled there 400 years. They didn't want to go back. Mm-hmm. Lord said, okay, fine. I'll make it rain in Israel, and I'll send a drought to Babylon. Now you stay wherever you want to. So we need to understand, the Lord is in control. And if we do what He's asked us to do, then it will be for our benefit.
Oh, Brother Bob?
Well, they weren't, even though they were gathering to Kirtland and building up the army and all that good sort of stuff. And it was going to be a temporary place, but they still needed to act like it was going to be there for several years, and then the Lord would move them when He was ready to move them, because their eventual destination was going to be independence. And they needed to realize that Kirtland was only a temporary place, even though they would be there for a while.
That's right. And that's what the Lord's really saying here. He's saying, look, you're going to be here for a little season. He didn't say 3 years and 6 months and 2 days, which, a lot of us wish He would say those kinds of things. But He didn't. He said for a little season. And, that could have been several years, for all that matter, right? It could have been a decade, but it wasn't. He just said little season, and then He told them, hey, listen, until you're commanded to go hence. So don't be thinking that this is great. And to Don's point, it was very, very good analogy. We do get really comfortable where we're at. We really like where we're at, and we don't really want to move. Even though the place that we want to go, the place that we're being asked to go is really the place we've wanted to go all along. And it contains within it the things that we needed and dreamed about. But we're happy where we're at. We've figured out how to do things. It's that becoming acclimatized to the environment around us. And that's the challenge. I always sit back, and every time I hear something outrageous on the news, or I see something that is very contrary to the doctrine of the church, just by turning the news on, and you think, wow, what would our ancestors? They would have gone nuts if they'd have seen some of the stuff. They'd be like, why aren't you absolutely going after this? Why aren't you standing up and saying and shouting from the rooftops, this is wrong? Well, we all know why, and we all know that we're now, it's a ocean of disobedience that's out there versus what it was. Okay, good thoughts. 5A to 5C. Someone like to read that? Yeah, yes.
Behold, this shall be an example unto my servant Edward Partridge in other places in all churches. And whoso is found a faithful, a just, and a wise steward shall enter into the joy of his Lord and shall inherit eternal life. Verily I say unto you, I am Jesus Christ, who cometh quickly in an hour you think not. Even so, amen.
Thank you, Sister Ray. So any thoughts on this? Yeah, Brother Don.
If there's ever any encouragement for giving your tithing, there it is. Whosoever is found faithful and just and wise steward shall enter into the joy of his Lord and shall inherit eternal life. Steward of resources, of time, talents, everything. Being faithful steward over those things is something that would be for our benefit. He gives us these laws, commandments, that we can become a better people and spread, as you pointed out a minute ago. He didn't tell us to go into all the world and create bishops. He told us to go all the world and preach the gospel, because the worldly things are necessary for us to live from day to day, but not for eternal life.
No, that's true. That's very true. You know, I look at, in that principle follows in just about everything. You can look back and say we're just, set what we're talking about in the church here, and look at some of the greatest inventors that were out there. Most of them had no money, nothing, no reputation. They really weren't anything. But yet what? They had that spark, and I would call it divine spark, of understanding, creativity, to be able to see beyond. And look what they did. Amazing, marvelous things. They invented all kinds of fantastic things. And we're looking at this, and the Lord's telling us the same thing, except in the spiritual realm. And really, it translates into the physical realm. Because if we do both, the blessings come in both areas. Okay, well, our time has fled. Thank you for your attention and your participation. And if we can make preparation for the service to come.